kind of the idea.
How did you get so good so fast? All right, that's the question on everyone's mind.
Yep.
Give us an honest answer. Enough with this
He's been
studying.
secretly training.
Get out of here. We want the truth.
Why do you fuck everyone up?
What's your fucking problem, man? What's your fucking problem?
Everyone you speak to, they go, how's your rounds with Joseph? He goes, yeah, he fucks me up. Everyone says this.
But this guy's definitely better than me by a mile these days. I'm stealing his moves from my own instructionals. Black belt Joseph.
Jozef Chen is considered by many jiu-jitsu players to be one of the best guard passers in the world. After being rescued from working as a Chinese gi manufacturer by Craig Jones, Jozef took full advantage of his freedom and dared to live the dream. He set sail around the world, training across multiple countries and continents, rolling with and learning from the best of the best. His travels would lead him to America, where he would cement his claim as the second most dangerous experiment to come out of a Chinese lab. In November 2025, I had the opportunity to attend a seminar being run by Jozef here in the UK. Realising that I wouldn't get many opportunities to learn directly from Jozef, I decided to jump at the opportunity. The seminar itself was on the topic of hand fighting from top position and the interplay between different passing positions. What impressed me most about the seminar was not so much the technique shown, but Jozef's clarity of thought with regard to specific situations. The way he spoke was that of a man who had already solved the problems that I had yet to encounter. Naturally, I was curious. Jozef is one of the few athletes in no-gi that truly makes guard passing look effortless. He moves well side to side, he changes levels well, and he really just glides around his opponents. Seeking this power for myself, I decided to have a closer look at his instructional content. Specifically, his first instructional product, Engaging Without Regrets. Considering that Jozef has potentially watched more instructionals than any other man on earth, I was quietly looking forward to seeing what his own instructional product would look like. At 1 hour, 19 minutes and 24 seconds, it was certainly on the short side, especially when you consider the later portion is dedicated to games for skill development. As someone who is used to the 8-hour plus John Danaher instructionals, I was expecting a cute little product focusing on what would cover a very niche area of guard passing. To my surprise, this wasn't the case, and I ended up going down a pretty deep rabbit hole. So, join me as we look to explore the secrets and untangle the ideas of Jozef Chen's Engaging Without Regrets. The fact that I decided to make a video about this specific instructional would probably lead you to believe that this is an incredible instructional, but that's not strictly the case. There's a lot of fantastic information contained within Engaging Without Regrets, provided you know where to look. If you watch this in the same manner that you may have watched other instructionals, then you might be setting yourself up for disappointment. A cursory glance of social media reviews show very mixed feelings about Jozef's product. The main consensus is that there aren't a lot of techniques, there is a ton of information, and the information presented is highly conceptualized. We can possibly cut Jozef a bit of slack here, as he probably didn't want to repeat or imitate other instructional products that are on the market. We can also forgive Jozef, as at the time of recording, he was probably only hanging out with other top competitors, so was very used to speaking about these high-level concepts. What's slightly less forgivable is Jozef's presentation style. Whilst it's clear that he knows what he's talking about, when you speak really quickly and hit people with many techniques and ideas in rapid succession, it becomes quite easy to miss important bits of information. People make fun of Danaher all the time for his Danaherisms, but he's not afraid to repeat key bits of information to help the viewer retain that important piece of information. The next criticism is not just of Jozef, but with instructionals in general. As most products are videos of the instructor talking, some insights are missed because of the absence of diagrams or tables. Being able to hear a concept is one component, however having a visual aid could also be helpful. Despite these criticisms, I do believe that Engaging Without Regrets has fantastic information and wonderful ideas expressed within it. In fact, the goal of this video is to potentially fix some of the issues associated with Jozef's product. By reorganizing and tinkering with some of Jozef's ideas, perhaps together we can create something even better. The first issue to work around is that the product is so niche that users might not even understand the initial problem that Jozef is trying to solve. Engaging Without Regrets is a great solution, but it's important to understand the context of the problem that got us here. In order to do that, we need to take a step back and analyse the instructionals that Jozef would have studied before arriving at his own ideas. There have been many attempts by other instructors to formalise approaches to guard passing. The two main instructionals which Jozef probably focused on early in his development were from John Danaher's Go Further Faster series. These were Go Further Faster Guard Passing and Go Further Faster Half Guard Passing. Both of these instructionals have different approaches to passing the guard. However, while the approaches may be different, they each contain a similar set of steps or tasks required to pass an opponent's guard. Go Further Faster Guard Passing focuses on what John refers to as the Negate Advantage Completion method. The central idea being that you want to shut down an opponent's dangerous guard first, before attempting to force a pass. Go Further Faster Half Guard Passing focuses on what John refers to as the 4-6-3 method, where we force the opponent into half guard before enacting a series of sequential steps to complete the pass. Whilst both these products cover great concepts and techniques, they are ultimately targeted for beginners. Advanced practitioners may require a bit more meat and may have a lot more specific questions. For instance, what do I do if my opponent does this very specific counter? Well, that's where Gordon's first guard passing instructional, Systematically Attacking the Guard, comes into play. There's a lot of great information for dealing with specific problems that we may encounter. The problem with this instructional is that the ideas presented are super reactive. This was at a time when Gordon hadn't had chance to formalise his own philosophies of passing, and instead was simply using the best tool to deal with each problem he encountered. In fact, it would take a couple of years and a few more instructionals before Gordon and the New Wave team would have anything like a distinct philosophy of guard passing. With this in mind, it's pretty difficult to see where Jozef's instructional would slot in. To do so, we shouldn't be looking at guard passing through a task-based or a technique-based lens. Instead, we should look at it through the phases of guard passing. By segueing over to another one of Jozef's instructional products, tripod passing, beating inside position, we can see how Jozef views the process of passing the guard. Rather than utilising the 4-6-3 system, or the negate advantage completion model we touched on earlier, Jozef instead breaks guard passing down into 3 phases: pass engagement, pass maintenance, and pass completion. If we look at the aforementioned John Danaher and Gordon Ryan instructionals, there is a lot of focus on pass maintenance and pass completion, however many underexplored areas of engagement, in particular when dealing with a seated opponent. With this in mind, this is where Jozef's instructional positions itself nicely. Engaging without regrets can act as a gateway that allows us to connect and enter other forms of guard passing safely. Or at least, that's possibly the original idea that Jozef is trying to help solve. Conceptually, the goal of engaging a guard is to get to the guard pass maintenance phase. While this might seem easy in theory, practically it poses a few challenges. In the training room, there is often an unspoken agreement about how one person is on bottom and the other is on top. Whilst this is typical when practicing with friends and training partners, when it comes to competition, a lot of athletes will not accept being taken down and being put in guard position. Instead, they will do their best to try and stand up and exit bottom position. Therefore, a key goal emerges. If we're planning on passing a guard, we must have strategies and tactics in place to ensure that the opponent stays in guard position. If the opponent does not want to play guard, then we must have the skills necessary to force them to play the position. In John Danaher's negate advantage completion model, John comments that the first thing to do when dealing with a dangerous guard is not to pass, but to shut down their offense. This theme is alive and well in Jozef's instructional, as the initial priority goal is to prevent the opponent from wrestling up. In order to do this practically, we need to move them from a seated guard posture to a supine guard posture. Don't get me wrong, the opponent can still utilise supine guards to sweep, entangle and submit us, but it becomes more difficult for the opponent to wrestle up. Contrast this with a seated posture, where it is easier for an opponent to heist and change levels. Remember, we're not ready to pass the guard just yet. We're removing one option from the opponent during this engagement phase. Throughout the pass maintenance phase, we'll be looking to remove our opponent's other options, but first we need to get there. Throughout the instructional, Jozef comments on the idea of choices, decisions that we make throughout a match, and decisions that our opponent makes in a match. Whilst we can be in control of our own actions, we cannot control what our opponent does. The first choice our opponent will present to us is whether they are playing seated guard or a supine guard. Both styles have their respective advantages and disadvantages, which Jozef does cover very well. In terms of engagement, this choice from our opponent affects our actions quite a bit. If the opponent starts supine, then a lot of the engagement phase is taken away from us. It's generally a lot safer to engage behind our elbows as we look to either step in a leg or go into outside passing sequences. It's relatively easy for us to connect our hands to our opponent's legs, and from here the passing begins. If the opponent starts seated, this opens up a new barrel of problems. We want to force them to their back, however if they insist on staying seated, this can be difficult. Jozef's solution to this problem is very clever. Rather than tackle a pure seated guard or a pure supine guard, which each have their own goals and central problems, Jozef instead targets putting the opponent in a new position. This new position doesn't have a name explicitly, however Jozef has titled it the intermediary position. This is where the opponent is caught in between supine and seated postures. They have their shoulders behind their hips and no ability to frame meaningfully. Jozef is deliberately putting the opponent in a position where they have none of the associated advantages of seated or supine, but they do have all of the disadvantages. This ties back to our original engagement goal of preventing the opponent from wrestling up. In fact, they won't be able to do much of anything while in the intermediary position, other than concede to supine, which is where we want our opponent to be. Now that we have a clear sense of what goal we want to achieve in the engagement phase, let's now dive into the practical ways that Jozef tries to achieve this. Previous studies on engagement in the seated versus standing scenario have largely been from the perspective of the bottom player. In this respect, Jozef's instructional holds a mirror to offense from the seated position. Jozef has gone on record saying he's a big fan of Gordon Ryan's systematically attacking the guard from seated position, having stated he has watched it multiple times. Having watched that instructional myself, my understanding of the seated position has improved based on Jozef's engaging without regrets. Gordon speaks in a very factual manner, as if the opponent is getting swept, submitted, or wrestled up on, irrespective of what they do. This might be the case when you have an elite seated guard, but not everyone in the world does. We touched earlier on the idea of choices. Our opponent has the option of being supine or seated. Well, we have some choices too. There are multiple ways of approaching a seated guard, and as the standing passer, these are choices that we have firm control over. We have the choice of leading with our arms, our head, or our legs. Whilst these choices might not seem like much, they have a profound influence over what attacks are going to be coming back our way. If we know what attacks are going to come towards us, this enables us to predict our opponent's actions, and most importantly, convert those actions into the beginnings of a guard pass. Let's take a look at each of these choices in turn. By leading with our arms, it's highly likely that we'll be in some form of square stance and bent over at the hip. We'll talk about specific stances a little bit later. However, I feel that understanding what your arms and what your opponent's arms are doing is also relevant for when we want to look at what our legs should be doing later, so we're covering this first. Jozef seems to agree, or at least he shows hand techniques before foot techniques in his instructional. We have a wide array of techniques that we can use to put our opponent into the intermediary passing position. We can push our opponent through shoulder posts, or we can grab our opponent at their ankles and elevate their feet. The problem, as always, is what we want to do and what we are able to do are two different things. A skilled opponent is going to hand fight with us, and whilst by keeping our legs away, they can't get to our legs, there is still plenty of offense that they can use. The main threats in terms of gripping we're likely to come across are variations of 2-on-1 grips and arm drag grips. Neither grip is particularly good for us as the guard passer. The opponent can begin to off-balance us, make us take a step, and truly get their offense going. If not addressed properly, then these grips will turn into something far more problematic, be it attacks on our legs or wrestle-ups. Throughout his instructional, Jozef provides useful nomenclature and classifications for types of gripping: active and reactive, direct and indirect, breaking and negating. While these classifications are useful, the main thing we want to focus on when leading with our arms is not what grip our opponent has on us, but more specifically what body position they are taking when making the grip. When making a grip from bottom position, the opponent generally has two choices in how they grip us. They can either provide a strong grip where they round their body and reinforce the grip of their hands with their hips and chest, or they can take a more relaxed grip where they are less concerned about holding onto the grip but more interested in occupying our hands during this engagement phase. These are the subtle cues that tell us how we're going to react. If the opponent grips us strongly, our goal will be to negate and counter by moving to a different position or by manipulating our opponent's body position. This idea is shared in Jason Rao's outside passing instructional, where he suggests using an opponent's 2-on-1 grip to force an angle and put the opponent supine. They will still have the 2-on-1 grip, but they will no longer be in the seated position. In instances of a strong arm drag grip, this can be countered by using our head position to crash into the opponent's shoulder. With our head positioned correctly, we can use our mobility advantage to move around our opponents. This particular idea shares a lot of themes with Gordon Ryan's guard passing instructionals, where there are multiple passing positions that incorporate burying our head into the opponent's far shoulder to negate a lot of their offense. It also happens to connect really well with tripod passing, another Jozef Chen forte. We'll talk more about leading with our head and proper head positioning in the next section, but now we're going to return to the ideas of dealing with an opponent's 2-on-1 or arm drag. However, this time, they aren't making a strong grip and they're a bit looser. With the opponent taking a more relaxed grip, this gives us the opportunity to break grips rather than simply negate them through movement. For breaking the 2-on-1, the focus will be on stripping the grip at the wrist with our free hand. We can also use the ideas of head positioning in the opponent's shoulder to facilitate movement in the same manner as we did with a strong arm drag. For looser arm drags, Jozef makes the distinction between the cross arm drag and the straight arm drag. Both will be something we have to deal with, and each will have its own tailored response. The cross arm drag is your traditional arm drag. The opponent's goal is to bring your arm across the centre line and begin exposing the back. The straight arm drag, on the other hand, is potentially a little more advanced. The idea here is to bring the top athlete's weight forward. This has tremendous synergy with forward shifts as a means to enter into pinch headlocks and shoulder crunches, neither of which is good for us. For cross arm drags, once again, Jozef's focus is stripping the grip at the wrist. Due to arm drags requiring a close upper body connection to be successful, Jozef favours opponents trying to cross arm drag him, as this gives him entry into underhooks and follow up headlocks, the preferred upper body configuration of any tripod passer. Straight arm drags, on the other hand, are a little trickier to deal with. At the higher levels of jiu-jitsu, you'll often see opponents giving a degree of back exposure to escape some bad spots. Where the previous cross drag exposes the back, the straight arm drag exposes something worse: limb extension. For straight drags, rather than hand fight as a means to strip grips, Jozef instead takes a more conservative approach by electing to use his knee and performing a knee drop to cover distance. Once the grip is stripped, we can't be naive as we are vulnerable to leg entries, so we're more than likely going to return back to some form of open guard. Now that we've explored some of the pathways we'll encounter by leading with our arms, it's time to look at what happens if we lead with our head. The idea of going head first into an elite player's guard may not seem like the smartest of ideas. In fact, this is something that Jozef doesn't explicitly cover in his instructional. However, the ability to use our head in conjunction with our arms is something that simply cannot be overlooked. Wrestlers and judokas have understood the importance of head position for decades, and if we're to be serious about engaging a seated guard, then we need to understand its importance here. Should an opponent beat our hands, it's only correct that they attempt to enter our legs. After our arms, our head should be our next level of protection to stop our opponents in their tracks. We saw earlier the usage of head positioning as a key tool in negating an opponent's upper body grips. In addition, proper head positioning negates the wrestler by preventing the opponent's ability to close distance. By matching our opponent's head height, it is a surefire way to keep our legs back and safe. Speaking of legs, it's now time to look at our final choice. What happens when we decide to engage our opponent with our lower body? In situations where we hand fight and rely on head positioning, it's very likely that we'll be in a square stance. The square stance certainly has some defensive advantages. However, when it comes time to move, we're going to have to take a step or two. As a result, we're likely to move into a staggered stance. When making this move, we'll be confronted with another set of choices. Either we can try to step our foot to the inside position, or we can try to outflank our opponent with movement. We'll address what happens when we first try to step a foot inside. Stepping feet to the inside position is not a new idea. Even before the no-gi leg lock revolution, people would still split the legs as a tactic to pass guard. From the inside foot, you can set up shop in positions like headquarters and the split squat. When the Danaher team came along, An even greater emphasis was placed on inside position as a means to shutting down an opponent's ability to enter leg locks. By attempting to step a foot to the inside, the common problems we'll encounter are variations of shin to shin and sit-up guard. The shin to shin is a very common situation we can expect to find ourselves in, so it's important to have answers for it. According to Jozef, the main goal of opponents using shin to shin is that it is a means to elevate your leg and enter ashigarami. As a result, Jozef has two main reactions depending on the skill level of his opponent. Considering that Jozef has great leg lock defense and it would take a skilled leg locker to submit him from a leg entanglement, the first reaction is to simply let them enter your legs. Once in the leg entanglement, congratulations, your opponent has now gone from seated posture to supine posture. By giving them what they want, you can take what you wanted all along. Of course, you'll still be having to deal with leg locks, however you've also removed a lot of their other options from the table. If dealing with a scary leg locker, or if we want to actually kill the shin to shin, we can utilise the second of Jozef's reactions. Jozef considers this one of the easier options when fighting from shin to shin inside the pocket. The idea actually corrects a move from Gordon Ryan's first guard passing instructional. Where Gordon would post on the floor, Jozef would post on the opponent's shoulder. From here, we use our shin to shin leg to knee cut to the straight hip. Once in place, our outside foot can be used to strip the shin to shin connection, allowing us to end up in headquarters. Once in headquarters, there are a few options available depending on the opponent's reaction. For the purposes of our study, I would consider putting the opponent in headquarters as successfully achieving our task and successfully engaging our opponent's guard. But I would be remiss to point out that we have excellent options from this position. Depending on whether we have the underhook or not, we have excellent options for traditional knee cuts or back steps. Anyone familiar with Gordon Ryan's Attacking the Guard 2.0 will see some tremendous synergy with the back steps into X-step style positions, leading into outside camping positions. In addition to the two strategies of allowing the entanglement or stripping the shin to shin, there are some other less seen possibilities to enter into front headlock scenarios. Jozef will use these tactically to either create back exposure or to flatten an opponent out. From a tactical perspective, Jozef has commented that he doesn't like pursuing submissions that could potentially concede top position. While the front headlock might not always be appropriate for dealing with shin to shin, it has good synergy with the next position we're likely to encounter, and that's variations of sit-up guard. For sit-up guard, the goal of the bottom player is to be on the outside of the knee. In this situation, Jozef covers two reactions which he deems appropriate, either proactive or reactive. If we can proactively anticipate an opponent entering into sit-up guard, we want to point our knee out and enter variations of front headlock. For reactive methods, Jozef favours back steps into a pseudo de la Riva situation, explored in depth throughout Gordon's Passing 2.0. Jozef doesn't like to hang out here too often. In fact, he's quite likely to front step after a back step in order to return to headquarters or to facilitate his side-to-side movement. In fact, it's this side-to-side movement which is a staple of Jozef's passing. By constantly moving side to side, it not only puts pressure on an opponent's guard, it makes it tricky for them to keep appropriate grips for any long periods of time. Dealing with shin to shin and sit-up guards are options where our opponent is able to connect to our lower body. But what happens when we don't want to connect? What happens when we want to react with movement? After covering the reactions we face when leading with our arms, head, and legs, it's time to start putting it all together. After all, while we may be static when we've successfully engaged an opponent's guard, it's quite likely that we'll be moving around while we're in the engagement phase. It was this section of Jozef's instructional that helped me the most. He was able to clarify some ideas on steps and movement that previous instructionals either neglected to cover or I simply wasn't able to spot or pick up at the time. Once again, we're going to return to a common theme that we've seen throughout Jozef's instructional, and that's the idea of choices. When leading with our legs, we're always confronted with which leg we want to lead with. I must admit that I had been guilty for the longest time of only leading with my right leg so I can pass to my left. If my opponent only has to worry about dealing with passes to one side, then I've literally cut my own options in half. As a result, in order to be an effective side-to-side passer, a priority skill is learning to lead with your non-dominant leg. Passing to your uncomfortable side might feel weird at first, however Jozef offers 2 footwork patterns that are wonderfully simple. They can be learned, practiced, and memorized in less than an hour, and honestly add a major stat boost to your outside passing game. The 2 patterns are the multi-step and combining cross steps with back steps. The multi-step is actually one of the moves that Jozef showed at his seminar. However, this wasn't part of the main demonstration. It was something that I happened to notice as Jozef was going around the room, troubleshooting questions. Thankfully, it was also part of his instructional series. The idea of the multi-step is to swap our lead leg mid-pass. This effectively gives our opponent more inside position than they wanted, in a configuration they didn't necessarily want. For instance, starting with a right leg lead and allowing the seated player to connect shin to shin, we can step our left leg into the inside foot position. To be successful in this manner requires a degree of comfortability leading with either leg, but by incorporating hand fighting and movement, it serves as a subtle trick to overwhelm your opponent. By mixing up looks when passing, it stops you from being as predictable. The second pattern is combinations of cross steps and back steps. This footwork pattern is so simple yet so effective, I almost feel completely stupid for not having figured this out myself. When utilised properly, it looks gorgeous, and is one of those moves that looks like you've effortlessly passed the guard. When you take a step forward, you automatically place yourself in a staggered stance. By changing your lead foot to a slight angle inwards, you have the option of moving in 2 directions. By moving the lead leg a second time, we can enter cross steps. By keeping the lead leg where it is, we can enter back steps. That's it. Just how in his instructional series Go Further Faster, Guard Retention, John Danaher explained that you actually only have a small amount of finite movements from each guard posture. Jozef shows that you actually only have a small amount of choices when engaging the guard. By combining the steps together, this is where footwork, movement, and combinations really start to give you some formidable tools as a guard passer. It's not strictly relevant to our study here, but there is something joyful to watch when you see an elite boxer employ footwork and movement into their strikes. There aren't too many examples of jiu-jitsu situations that allow for nice footwork, so this is certainly a welcome tool to add to the skill set. Now that we've had a chance to explore the ideas of leading with our arms, head, leg connections, and leg movements, it's time to move from theory into practice. Sure, these are the things that Jozef explains and teaches, but what does he do when it's time to go live? What does he do in roles and in competition? Sometimes you get instructionals with extra techniques to pad the length of the product. As a result, you get a bunch of techniques that you don't really see the instructor use in competition. You'll be somewhat pleased to hear that Jozef not only uses the techniques that he shows, you'll be disappointed that he didn't show more of his arsenal of moves in this product. The movements and ideas shown in Jozef's instructional are subtle and conceptual. In fact, when watching him navigate some of the top guards in the sport, they change positions so quickly and interchangeably, it can be very difficult to spot what you should be looking for. One theme which we return to is choices. Given the choice, we see Jozef switch between leading with arms, legs, and in recent matches, his hips. This idea is formalised through the concept of leading edge in his follow-up instructional, things he didn't show to Craig Jones. Once you beat an opponent's grips, you'll most likely be running into their frames. It's here that Jozef cements the innate advantage of being in top position. He keeps weight on his opponent, however constantly changes his angle, changing his leading edge. By switching between shoulders and hips, Jozef can redirect his opponent's body without using his hands or feet. This allows him to prevent an opponent from re-engaging with their hands or trying to stand up. In fact, a lot of what Jozef does can be seen as the mirror opposite to some of the ideas presented in John Danaher's Go Further Faster, Open Guard, and Guard Passing. In his Open Guard series, John remarks that the number one successful trait of any open guard is the ability to generate kazushi and off-balance our opponents. In his Guard Passing series, John comments that the first task in passing a dangerous guard is to shut down said guard. Jozef's style takes this to a whole new level. Why should the person on bottom have all the fun trying to off-balance the person on top? Why can't, as we're trying to pass, we try to frustrate and off-balance the person on bottom? This was perhaps best displayed in his breakout 2023 European Trials run, where he was able to beat back-to-back 3 ADCC veterans using variations of his engagement and maintenance skills. What's particularly interesting about these examples is how differently Jozef chooses to engage, not just across matches, but sometimes within the same match. This was potentially best highlighted in his quarter-final match with Mateusz Jasinski. Mateusz's initial strategy involved wanting to be supine, but often started his own grip fighting engagement from seated position. This led to many engagement and re-engagement opportunities as Jozef tried to solve the puzzle of Mateusz's guard. Throughout the match, Jozef would maintain a head-to-head position whenever Mateusz was seated. Whilst Jozef clearly did his homework on how to prepare for Mateusz and his dangerous leg locks, there were a few instances where Mateusz tried to stand up during the bout. Remember at the start of this video where we talked about goal setting and that sometimes before you can engage a guard, you have to force the opponent to accept that they are playing guard? Well, that's what Jozef did here. By controlling the bottom leg of a grounded opponent, this limits their ability to stand up. If you control the opponent's top leg, you can certainly limit their ability to high leg and retain guard, but you don't actually stop them from standing up. The main danger is that the opponent swaps their hips and subsequently which leg is on top or bottom. This means that if we want to prevent the heist and keep an opponent on the floor, we should swap which leg we control as well. While this strategy was successful in preventing Mateusz from standing up, Jozef would have been quite pleasantly surprised in his semi-final match against Tommy Langlacher. Tommy seemed quite content not to stand up and was happy just to play guard. This stands in stark contrast to Jozef's finals match against Oliver Tarza. Jozef was able to get Oliver to the floor reasonably quickly, however spent much of the match trying to prevent Tarza from standing up rather than passing directly. By preventing the stand-up, he was forced to deal with Oliver's leg entanglements. When Jozef addressed the entanglements, he was forced to prevent the stand-up. The ADCC 2023 European Trials was Jozef's breakout performance. He defeated a murderer's row of top athletes using a variety of skills in order to stay in top position. It's easy to point to Jozef's strategy throughout the tournament and altering his game plan for each match depending on his opponent's strengths and weaknesses. However, it is my earnest belief that a lot of the strategies and tactics were only made possible through excellent guard engagement and re-engagement. It's almost as if Jozef knew how to engage without regrets. As we near the end of the instructional, Jozef presents a few task-based games in order to build specific skills and to build confidence when approaching the guard. Despite my earlier criticisms of the instructional, these games are actually quite excellent and are really useful. In fact, there's nothing stopping you from taking the format of these games and applying them to other jiu-jitsu scenarios. Personally, I'm having a lot of fun incorporating them into my own training, and hopefully others are as well. At the beginning of this video, I said there's a lot of fantastic information contained within Engaging Without Regrets, provided you know where to look. By thinking of engaging the guard as a specific task, with a specific objective and a measurable outcome, it can serve as the bedrock for any serious guard passing program. If we don't think about it this way, then this instructional will struggle to find its place within your guard passing game. Jozef's instructional in isolation might be weak, but the concepts taught have in retrospect made other instructionals better. Engagement will not pass a guard on its own, but it will set you up for a greater chance of success. Jiu-Jitsu is often less about how you start, but more often how you finish. With engaging without regrets, hopefully we can start well and pass even better. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing. If you're interested in supporting the channel further, please check out my Patreon page. There you'll find breakdowns of matches, discussions of Jiu-Jitsu events, short techniques, and I'll be using the page as a platform for my own instructional content. You can also support me by following me on my socials, or by using my discount codes to pick up some sweet merchandise. I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.